Ladies and gentlemen, remember, all stories are true.
Because I am a god.
Imagine everything you know and love gone, vanished, replaced by nothing, emptiness, silence. Isolation, it's not just a prison. It's a slow, excruciating death. Your heart races, sweat beads on your brow. Your whole body screams danger, because it is. Time stretches, minutes become hours, hours become days, and you humans crack, splinter, shatter into 1,000 pieces. Funny, isn't it? This is how the wicked among you are reformed to model citizens. The cruelty is quite delightful. But here's a devilish secret. An isolated mind is fertile ground. It's the perfect place to plant seeds of despair. Just ask Dale Evans. Would you like to hear his story? Of course you would.
It was a bright, sunny, late October day in San Francisco, California, when Dale Evans, aspiring influencer, finally figured out how he was going to make a name for himself. Sitting on the beach in his salt-crusted wetsuit, surfboard resting momentarily forgotten by his side, an idea struck him. It was an idea he was deadly certain would turn his daydreams of internet fame into reality.
Hubris, the fatal flaw that turns men into cautionary tales. Consider Dale Evans, sun-addled and yearning for notoriety, convinced he's discovered the key to internet stardom. Little does he know, his groundbreaking idea is but the first step on a dangerous path. As Dale sets his misguided plan in motion, we bear witness to the cruel turnings of fate. How easily the pursuit of fame can sweep even an experienced surfer into waters far deeper and darker than imagined.
Resting by the waves on the beach was one of his favorite things to do. He loved the solitude, peacefulness, and feeling of well-being as the waves lapped at his feet in the sand. The cold Pacific water was invigorating, and a day spent surfing really cleared his mind of troubles, allowing him a break from the day-to-day grind. Often he found his best ideas came to him after a quick session, and today's idea was no different. On the empty beach, Dale's eyes are fixed on his phone, thumb flicking and swiping across the screen. A grin spreads across his face. This was it. It was going to be his big break. No one had ever done this before.
But there's a reason no one's attempted this before. A few more minutes of research could have saved Dale a world of pain. But that's how these things go, isn't it? The thrill of the unknown clouds judgment, and today's excitement becomes tomorrow's nightmare. In our haste to be first, to stand out, we often overlook the dangers lurking in the shadows. One might say it's human nature, this impulsiveness, but nature has a way of correcting such behavior. Remember, the unknown isn't always kind to those who rush to embrace it. Sometimes it embraces back, and its grip can be deadly. How thrilling to watch Dale's adventure unfold. Wouldn't you agree?
Just the 14-hour drive north in Darrington, Washington, let the three fingers look out, a small hut strapped with cables to a rocky peak in the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest. It was built in 1930 by men who blasted away the mountaintop as if nature wouldn't notice. It stood atop a remote and rugged landscape with nothing but treasures, geodrops on all sides. Accessible only via 18 miles of hell and nearly 7,000 feet of elevation, the lookout was one of the most remote in the country. Exactly the challenge Dale was looking for. In his mind, it was perfect. Solitude, struggle, breathtaking views, the precise recipe needed for instant fame. He would pack enough supplies to live there for a week, maybe two, if he could ration his supplies, filling his adventures and struggles along the way. There was nothing up there but the hut and little outdoor space, but that was the draw of the challenge. He could already see the amazing panoramic views, cinematic drone shots, all combined with his insightful and deep commentary on the difficulty of being completely alone at the top of the world with nothing to do.
Isolation is more than mere solitude. It's a test of one's mental strength. In such desolate surroundings, a person confronts their innermost fears. Scenic views offer little comfort against the stark reality of complete isolation. Time itself becomes distorted, each moment stretching to eternity. One's thoughts, usually a comforting companion, may take on unexpected forms. It's rather ironic that in seeking to reach the top of the world, an individual might instead discover the depths of their own imagination.
Dale spent the rest of the day frantically running around his apartment, grabbing items and hastily shoving them into his backpack. The hike was sure to be long and difficult, so traveling lightly with a small backpack was very important. Of course, his grand feat would also need to be well documented, so the majority of his backpack was filled with tech. A camera with a massive lens, its carrying case, a drone, and its case too, a foldable solar panel to recharge everything, of course, a portable camping stove, 2 fuel canisters, a large bag of rice with seasoning packets, a small pillow, and a lightweight blanket. On his bed lay a heavy coat that he sat out earlier. He considered it and then tossed it to the side for something lighter. To save packing space, he was already planning to wear a hydration pack and only take the clothes he was wearing. As Dale finished packing, a family photo on his bedside table caught his eyes, and he thought briefly of calling them up to share his grand idea. But of course, thought better of it. It would make his video that much better if he surprised them all, the surfer dude, conquering another domain. So, with a week's worth of rice and enough camera gear to film a blockbuster, Dale threw his overstuffed backpack into his beat-up truck and climbed in. With a quick turn of the keys, the truck's old engine sputtered to life, belching a bit of smoke as Dale raced off into the night. 14 hours of open road ahead. 14 hours to reconsider. But Dale was never one to second-guess his decisions. Fighting sleep for the last 3 hours, Dale's truck finally pulls into an empty parking lot with the dashboard clock reading 9:12 a.m. He stumbled out of his truck, stretching his legs and looking up at jagged mountain peaks in the distance. 3 miles an hour, 6 hours, piece of cake. He climbs back into his truck, sets an alarm on his phone. Just a quick little nap. As he closes his eyes, a cold wind rustles nearby leaves, almost like a whispered warning. Sleep well, Dale. It may be your last peaceful rest. Several hours later, Dale jerks awake, disoriented. He shivers violently, the warmth of his truck gone, and his breath now visible in the air. It was a stark contrast to San Francisco. He only had a vague sense that he overslept, but that feeling was set aside. He hadn't expected the severe cold. For a moment, he thought about canceling the whole thing and going back to the cool familiarity of the Pacific. Then that moment passed as he remembered checking the weather before he left, and it had definitely said it would be sunny. All of this freezing coldness would be negated as he started hiking in the warm sunshine. Outside of the truck, enormous Douglas fir trees loomed, dark and forbidding around the small parking lot, casting long, pointed shadows through light fog. There were still no other cars in the lot, just his truck, with the forest standing silent all around him. Digging out his phone, his eyes opened in alarm to see it was already past noon. Great, he thought. Now I'll have to rush. He rubs his arms, trying to warm up. For a moment, he considers bringing the truck back to life and warming up. No. Too much time has already been lost. YouTubers do that shit all the time. Can't be that hard, right? So, donning his pack and camera in hand, he locked up his truck and began his defining adventure.
Hey YouTube, what's up? I'm Dale, and this is the Three Fingers Challenge. It's pretty wild. We're gonna see how long I can hang 10 by myself in a tiny lookout at the top of that mountain. So check it out. It's kind of gnarly here. The trail is overgrown and stuff, but get this. They've got these machetes just laying around for anyone to use. Pretty cool, right? Well, anyways, I've got my machete, camera, and enough food for a week. Should be fun, I think. What could go wrong, you know? Oh, and if you like this, maybe hit that subscribe button. I don't know. It's what people say, right? Okay, let's do that. It's okay. Everything's under control. Just a little wind. Okay, take 2. Let's do this.
Of course, whose control everything is under is another story. With a white-knuckled grip on the machete, Dale began his adventure. All around, a light fog still clung to the trees as a cold breeze rattled the few leaves that remained. It was cold, but it was nothing the dark Pacific waters hadn't already prepared him for. He took a deep breath, felt the tension in his body give way, and began down the trail. At the beginning, he would break every mile or so to set up his tripod and record himself walking the trail. This got more difficult as the flat trail gave way to overgrown, uneven paths covered in limbs, roots, and various rocks. With only a few hours of sleep, he lost the energy to retread the same path multiple times, and eventually decided a first-person point of view would be okay for a bit. A couple of hours in, the first waypoint slowly revealed itself through the trees: Saddle Lake. Finding a nice opening at water's edge, he drops his equipment to rest for a moment and take in the view. It was very quiet out, but most of the fog had cleared away, giving him a clear line of sight across the lake. Sitting on a fallen tree, he pulled out an energy bar, hands shaking slightly as he unwraps it, to have his first bite of food since leaving the night before. Taking a bite, he looks out over the lake.
This is the life, right?
His thoughts trail off, and he focuses again on the silence around him. It's only interrupted by the sound of his chewing. No birds, no insects, not even a breeze to rush through the trees. Shifting uncomfortably, he's suddenly aware of how small he is in this vast, uncaring wilderness. He was halfway through his energy bar when a sound cut across the lake, freezing Dale in his tracks. A high-pitched tone, followed by a low-pitched tone, called out, beckoning for his attention. Dale snaps out of his unfocused gaze, dropping the rest of his energy bar to the ground. Nothing moves, but there was a sudden, heavy feeling of being watched. Its oppressive feel was made more apparent by the stillness of the lake. It was like the world was on pause, frozen at that precise moment in time, waiting with bated breath. There was no movement to be heard as he strained his ears to listen. Silence. Then that eerie two-tone call pierced through the air again, this time noticeably closer. Fall had already swept through, and it was almost impossible to move silently through the forest. Scanning the perimeter of the lake, and then in the treetops when that proved fruitless, there was no signs of anyone or anything, so he turned back to his camera, fear growing in his eyes.
Hey, YouTube. Something weird just happened. I think I heard a... Hello? Is anyone out there? This isn't funny.
The whistle sounds again, closer still. Dale jerks towards the sound, nearly dropping the camera. Yelling across the lake, his voice echoes through the surrounding trees,
Hello?
sounding hollow and frightened.
Anybody out there?
Thumping heavily inside his ears, his heart mimicked the falter in his voice and continued to pump in a manic fashion.
And so it begins. The moment Dale realizes he may not be as alone as he thought. What a delightfully dreadful predicament. Picture it, being in an unfamiliar forest, truck hours away, without so much as a whisper of cell reception. How quaint. Of course, it's only now, in his moment of terror, that Dale wishes he had informed someone of his whereabouts or his grand ambitions. Can you imagine? The poor boy thought telling someone would have spoiled his little surprise. But perhaps, just perhaps, they might have mounted a daring rescue had he been gone a bit too long. Such a shame, really. One does wonder, how long will it take before anyone notices he's missing? Days? Weeks? Months, even? The suspense is simply delicious.
Shit. Guys, it's so quiet out here. Too quiet. You know how in nature programs they say everything gets quiet when a predator is around? Yeah, no. Fuck me, dudes. It better not be a bear. Don't birds have, like, songs to warn other birds? What if that's what it was, and I'm just sitting here yelling? Do theirs run for noise? I was going to rest a bit longer, but this just flows off. Maybe I'm blowing it all out of proportion, or it's the lack of sleep, but I think I'm going to play it safe and get going. I don't want to climb up to the lookout in the dark, especially now, and I don't have anything to camp outside with. I thought I could make it up in a day. That's what all of the videos did. F***. Let's do this.
Hoisting his bag over his shoulders with machete in hand, the ultimate adventure continued. He remained tense for a while, but as the distance grew and the sounds of the world came back, his mood improved. Just a minor hiccup. That peaceful feeling would soon return, and he'd forget all about the Whistler. With fear seemingly behind him and continuing up the mountain, great progress was made. Around 4:00 p.m., the line of dark, watchful conifers gave way, signaling the start of the mountain peak, and an equally looming, dark, cloudy sky stepped in to continue the watch. In the distance, the lookout was just visible enough to give intrepid hikers hope that they'd soon be resting under its roof. There were several miles to go, but that didn't stop dreams of going viral and becoming the next YouTube star to take flight. It felt closer than ever now, despite the angry sky. Zigzagging his way up and down the mountainside trail, a deeper cold was creeping in as the simple, rocky path continued to stretch, seemingly forever upward. The wind was beginning to pick up too, and with it brought a light snow. A clear memory of all sunny days showing on his phone for the week flashed through his mind. Never did he imagine it changing so much in just 24 hours. San Francisco was never like this. Perfect days almost every day were the norm. Still, This wasn't too bad compared to the Pacific, but the snow itself was worrying. That had not been in the forecast. The wide open grasses around him began to take on a frosty appearance. If the snow kept up at this rate, he'd have to deal with climbing the last little bit of the journey, the steepest part of the whole thing, through several inches of snow. Aside from the machete, there was nothing in his pack that would keep him from sliding back down the steep inclines. A fleeting thought also occurred to him. It would make for some really good footage, so he pressed on. Detaching his camera from his chest, he held it out in front of him.
Hey guys, so, slight problem. That's where we're headed. Looks close, right? It's not. And it's all uphill from here. Gotta pick up the pace. The snow, it wasn't supposed to be like this. These gloves, they're not great for ice. Could be tricky near the top. Okay, we're doing this. Gotta keep moving. Stay with me, guys. This might get... well, let's just get there, all right?
The path before him was quickly becoming more dangerous, with the wind and snow now working together against him. Reattaching his camera to his chest, he started jogging towards the lookout. With every footstep, the wind howled louder and longer in his ears, and the snowflakes began stinging his eyes. The wind was now starting to cut through his layers and wicking away his body heat. Heart pounding and breathing heavily, the forced march continued upward. Another realization surfaced. He hadn't considered the elevation making the air substantially thinner. The thought caused an unconscious shaking of his head back and forth, but it wasn't super concerning since he had been to much higher elevations in Colorado a few years ago. With a sudden jolt, his right foot came down on a rock hidden by the fresh snow. His ankle twisted painfully, sending him tumbling onto his back, down the slope, stopping a few feet away. The pain lasted a few seconds before subsiding into a throbbing sensation.
Oh! My ankle! I went down hard. That hurts. It's not good, guys. But the cold, maybe that's helping. I can't really feel it much. Spock Mercy's right. Just give me a minute. Need to let it stop throbbing. Can't stay here long. Gotta keep moving. Just one more minute.
He laid there on his back for about 30 seconds, looking up at the sky, wondering for a moment why he had decided this was such a great idea. He had only ever backpacked once in his life. How could he be so stupid to think he could just tackle a mountain without any preparation? His thoughts quickly shifted back to his throbbing foot. Wiggling it a bit, he felt sharp pain in certain positions. Dale connected the camera back to his chest and wiped the falling snow from his face. He stared upwards at the angry sky with an unfocused gaze. Snowflakes continued to crash into his eyes until he just closed them and laid there. This was not how it was supposed to be going. He cursed himself for sleeping an extra hour. That could have been just enough to have him up in the safety of the lookout, ankle still in working order. Now he was laid out flat on his back, injured, exposed to the elements, and jack-all for supplies. Anger swung quickly to anxiety and back and forth, ever souring his mood. With a sudden start, eyes snapping open, he bolted upright, sending a layer of snow rolling down his chest and on his lap. He had fallen asleep on the slope, long enough for a substantial layer of snow to build up on him and for his tracks to have almost vanished.
I think I passed out. How low was I? Oh God. It's so much worse. I can't even see the trail anymore. I should go back, right? That's what I should do. But I didn't bring a tent or anything. I was supposed to be there by now. I gotta keep going. There's no other choice. I just gotta make it.
Sitting there in the snow, with the camera still on him, he realized how dire his situation was becoming. The confident cold-water surfer was no match for the mountains. It had chewed him up, spit him out, and then stomped him down some more. The snowflakes continued to fall, and were starting to stick to his face, melting and forming a layer of ice. Each one sent the cold deeper into his core. He was sure the camera was capturing his full mood at the moment. He had always wanted to convey himself as happy and unflappable. But that mask was long gone. Things were completely sideways. Surely his audience would understand. Again, he shook his head unconsciously. Looking up at the blackened skies, he became aware that the sun had set, and what little light remained was quickly extinguishing. Through the heavy snowfall and biting wind, a faint whistle cut through the air. The same eerie two-tone whistle, starting high and falling low, made his stomach leap into his throat. Frozen in place, his eyes darted back and forth, looking for any sign of movement. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30 seconds.
Did you guys hear that? That whistle. It's back. Fuck, man. I just wanted to make a cruel video, you know? This is so messed up. What the hell could it be out there? It's a fucking blizzard. It's all open, right? I should see something, anything. Maybe it's just the wind, yeah? Playing tricks or something. It's gotta be the wind. It has to be. Right, guys?
The snow continued to fall as he sat there, processing, watching, and trying to convince himself that everything was okay.
Okay, I gotta keep going now. Fuck whatever this is, it can't follow me up to the lookout. The best thing for me right now is to keep going and just get out of sight. Alright, okay, I'm going to do this. It's gonna hurt, but I gotta do this. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
With that, he summoned enough energy to launch himself upright. His foot complained, but not as much as he expected, thanks to the numbing from the severe cold. With a deep breath, he started quickly hobbling towards the last bit of the hike, the climb up to the lookout. Slowly and leaning forward to catch himself if he suddenly slipped, he began ascending with his arms wrapped tightly around himself. After a few steps, he noticed there was solid ice underneath the layer of snow. He had seen in several YouTube videos that there was a glacier that covered some of the mountaintop. At the time, he assumed he'd be able to see where he was going and avoid the worst of it. But now, here at the glacier, he couldn't see at all where it extended. But the good news was that it meant he was very close to the lookout. He moved cautiously, shifting left and right, but there was nothing but smooth, slick ice beneath the snow. Panic began to set in as his mind kept seeing shadows and hearing whispers, causing him to glance back. Finally, he realized if he found a spot with enough snow, he could work it with his good foot and hands into makeshift handholds. Cautiously, he balanced on each one, using the machete as a tool to help create the next one. Each foot he moved upwards gave him a bit of relief. If it was hard for him, anyone else would struggle too, and they definitely wouldn't be able to sneak up on him. As he cleared the top of the glacier, his hands throbbed with cold through his gloves, losing dexterity with each passing second. But ahead, he could just barely make out the final 3 ladders, the last obstacle between him and the lookout. Wobbling as he stood up, he quickly leaned forward and rested on his knees. The thin air and cold winds were taking a toll on him, but he was able to shuffle to the first ladder. With as much strength as he could muster, he forced his hands to close around the rungs of the ladder. One slow step at a time, he made his way up ladder 1, and then 2. Getting to the third one always looks terrifying in the online videos. He didn't dare turn around. Instead, he leapt through the darkness, forgetting about his ankle. He landed on both feet and collapsed in pain, but only for a moment. Rebounding quickly, the third ladder groaned as he haphazardly launched himself upwards. The weather had left a bit of ice on the rungs, which quickly shrugged his boots and cracked his knee as he slipped. But the loose grip of his cold hands just barely held him, and he pulled himself back inward. When he reached the top, he swiped snow away, exposing the rope he had seen. Wrapping it around his hands, he used what remaining strength he had to yank himself up, one bound forearm at a time. The lookout should be directly ahead of them now, but there was nothing but darkness swallowing everything around him. Crawling on his hands and knees, he made his way around the building towards the door, each movement shaking, unsteady, and slow. Grabbing the knob, he gave it a turn. Nothing. Now, raw and numb from the cold, his hand struggled to turn it. His gloved hands fumbled some more before an idea from an old Christmas movie popped into his head. He flung his left hand downwards a few times to rid it of his glove. As soon as he did, he licked his entire hand and grasped the door again. It welded to his palm and stuck immediately, allowing him to wrench the lookout door open. Then, just as quickly, he fell into the door and ripped his hand loose, slamming the door shut behind him. Inside the pitch-black interior, he groped around for a lock and finally found the latch to secure. Tugging it a few times, he confirmed it was locked and fell against the door. His heart pounded profusely in his chest. pulsating in his ears. For a few minutes, he felt as though he might be on the verge of a heart attack. Laying against the door, wheezing heavily in the dark, he wiped his running nose across his frozen sleeve and slid to the floor. It wasn't warm on the inside by any means, but the biting wind and snow was now gone. Gradually, feeling returned to his limbs as he calmed down. He took off his backpack and used the light from his phone to take stock of everything around him. The lookout couldn't have been much more than 10 feet square. Its interior was sparse, consisting of a simple bed, a chair, a table, and a few scattered odds and ends. Every wall was waist-high and topped with windows that spanned the entire length of each wall. On the outside of each window, a panel of wood lay flat against it to protect it against storms, but they were often kept open. Tonight, though, they would remain shut. He emptied the contents of his bag onto the table, setting up his portable stove as a makeshift heater. The tiny flame provided a small but soothing bit of warmth. Wrapping himself in his blanket, he then dragged the chair in front of the door and collapsed into it. Outside, the wind howled and battered the sides of the lookout relentlessly, as though upset he had escaped its grasp. Drops of melted snow and ice were slowly starting to drip from his clothing and tap against the floor. He sat there, quietly thawing, listening intently, while exhaustion continued to pull at his eyes. Fear was the only thing keeping him awake at this point.
It followed me. There was nothing out there. Nothing. But you heard it, right? Right when I was on the ladders. Shut the door. The chair's against it. Windows are locked, but there's these panels outside. Can't lock them. Gotta figure that out in the morning. If there is a morning. I'm safe now. I'm safe. I have to be. Oh God, look at it. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Just a simple trip, you know? Just make a cool video. The cold was hiding how bad. I can't feel my toes, but everything else is on fire. I don't have anything, no first aid, nothing. How am I supposed to get down from here?
Outside, the sound of sudden footsteps raced along the side of the lookout and stopped abruptly at the door. He expected it to shake violently, but there was nothing but the wind howling. The wind screamed with intensity, and a slow creak filled the room. He tried to focus on the window, to see something, anything, but all he caught was his own frightened reflection in the stovelight. He was certain a panel on one of the windows had been lifted. He felt eyes watching him. He kept straining to make out anything. That's when his ears picked up the faintest of taps against one of the window panes. There was no doubt that one of the outside panels was open now. Without a moment's hesitation, he reached across and extinguished his small stove and turned off everything. The lookout was thrust into darkness, and his eyes slowly began adjusting. Outside, the tapping stopped, As quietly as he could, he crawled as close as he dared and tried to peer out through the side of the window. Behind him, another creaking hinge could be heard, followed by that dreaded whistle and more light tapping on the glass. He desperately began feeling around for the machete, found it, and backed himself against the wall. For the rest of the night, he remained completely motionless, retreating into the recesses of his mind and blocking out the sounds. He could no longer handle the world, so he didn't. Eventually, the winds died down, the snow abated, and dawn pushed its way into the lookout. As it did, Dale started to come back as well. The first thing he noticed was the sheer beauty of the mountains. All around him, Mother Nature glowed in undulating snow-covered forest as far as he could see. He took it all in, his confusion starting as a small seed, but quickly growing as he began questioning how he made it through the night. He remembered the horrible whistle and the taps on the glass as well. There was also that horrible creak of the hinges on the panel as they were lifted into place. Dale's heart skipped a beat and then stumbled over itself several more times. He had only heard 2 panels open. Spinning around, now they were all open. He braced himself against the wall as his knees buckled. Confusion, fear, and panic all collided in his head and fought for control. Everything seemed to be in order, but something was off. He scanned the room from right to left, left to right, trying to get whatever it was to register. There was danger, but he couldn't see it. He needed to sit down, but the chair was no longer against the door. It was back in the corner where it had been on his arrival, and his belongings, his backpack, and all of his equipment were gone. No phone, no stove, no nothing. He sat in the chair and, upon looking up, he noticed that not all of his equipment was gone. His camera was sitting on a small table by the bed, still recording. Grimly, he walked over to it and stopped the recording and played it back. It was nothing but darkness and the sounds of the violent storm for hours. He fast-forwarded until he caught a glimpse of motion and rewound it back a little. From his camera's tinny speakers came the 2-tone whistle, followed by the sound of the door opening and the chair barking as it was shoved across the wood floor. Footsteps could be heard, and then some jostling of the camera. All remained still until he heard a match strike and his stove came to life, glowing center screen on top of the table. He was behind the stove, opposite from the camera. Quickly looking up to where the camera would have been was nothing. There was nothing that it could have been perched on, but he didn't have time to think on that. Instead, his attention turned back to himself on the screen.
Hey guys, I've decided I'm not going to do this anymore. So, I'm just going to pack it up and go.
He then watched himself pack his bag and launched it out the doorway with enough force to send it over the jagged drop just a few steps away. He then came back and without hesitation threw his stove after it, sending it down to join his backpack at the foot of the mountain. There's nothing but darkness on screen now. He could hear heavy, clodding footsteps across the floor, the sound of furniture shifting, and the winding creak of the door being shut. He stood there for a moment in disbelief, Outside lay nothing but fresh snow, not a single step to be seen. He started the recording again.
Mom, Dad,
There is no amount of preparation or mental fortitude that can withstand absolute and unending isolation. It is a malignant, uncaring beast that breaks all. For those who survive, what emotion do you think will fill that empty husk of a mind? Happiness, sorrow, rage. Let's hope you never find out.
Trapped at the top of the world, with nothing to do, I'm losing my mind. Every minute is a crime, a death sentence in time. Whistle in the day, whistle in the night, feeling full of fright, danger is in sight. Trapped at the top of the world, with nowhere to go. Winds howl with might, the shadows take delight. Oh no, it's time to say good night. Dreams are ghosts that slip away, lost in the shadows.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude our transmission from Three Fingers Lookout Station. The time is 12 o'clock a.m. The wind howls at 3,000 feet, and visibility beyond the lookout windows has dropped to zero. Our signal will return when the storms clear, if they clear. We remind our viewers to secure all doors and windows. Check your emergency supplies, and remember, if you hear knocking at your door after this broadcast ends, do not answer. The isolation has a way of playing tricks. This has been Mountain Terror Television, broadcasting on the emergency frequency from the North Cascades. We leave you now with our national anthem performed by the Echo Valley Municipal Band, recorded before the incident. Please stand by. Please stand by.